Hello class, welcome to the second lecture of our online tutorial. Uh, Today we'll be discussing about how to write Dart programming language and the rules associated with it. But before that, let me just summarize what we have learned last week or in the last video. We said that computers are machines that can be programmed to do different tasks. Therefore, they need a program. And what program is a set of instruction executed step by step or sequentially. And to write this program, we need some type of language or some type of programming language. And that is such a type of high-level language. And today, as I have said earlier or moments ago, we will learn how to write Dart and the rules associated with the language. This is contents of chapter 2. Although we'll not cover all of it, we'll try to cover half of it in this lecture, and on the next lecture we'll just finish the rest. As I have mentioned in the last class or in the last video, our plan is to actually install the IDE and start practicing with the code. But since that is not available, we'll use some online tools and improvise with that. Everything is not similar to the IDE, but we'll try to handle what we can. So first, it's based, if you go to this website, which is jdoodle.com, and we'll write our first code. And our first code has a task of displaying greetings for anyone who runs it. As we have mentioned in the last lecture, your program can play a video, your program can enable you to browse through the internet, your program can allow you to chat, such as KakaoTalk. You can have multiple programs, but the task of this program is just to display a string on the console window. So let's go to jdoodle.com and write our code and execute it. So here you can write void main, and then we want to greet or we want to write a program that greets everybody, right? So we can say print hello from the Dart side. So maybe you know about hello world in another language such as C++ or Python or Kotlin or Swift. So we are saying hello from the other side. That means we want to display greetings from the Dart side. And if you run or execute this program, you can see that this program will print hello from the Dart side. So you can see that this program can display this. So you can write multiple instructions, as we will do on later slides. You can give multiple instructions, but here there is only one instruction, and this instruction told the computer or the compiler to just display this. So let's get back to our lecture and continue to learn what other rules we need from Dart programming. However, here you can see that this slide was prepared for Intel IDE or IntelliJ IDE. So you can see that how you can run your program and everything. One thing I would ask you to do is to save all of the files that we will write here onto your computers, so that later when we come to class you can be able to reuse them. So if you can see here, whatever you write here, just save it on any text editor, Notepad or Notepad++, and give it a name which says first.dart. So when you write a program, your program will interact with data. That means, say you want to register the phone number of your friends. Then your friend name is a string, right? A sequence of characters. And your friend's phone number is an integer. That means a sequence of numbers, right? So whenever you write a program to hold or to store your friends or your classmates' phone number, you interact with a string and a number data type. And these program data are actually the fundamental building blocks, or mostly used to build a complex data structure or a complex data type, as we will see later on. And therefore, what is a variable then? Since you are interacting with data, you need some way to store your data. And to store your data, you need variables. So a variable is a named storage location in a computer program, which helps you store a data from a program. So whenever you write your name, for instance, you want to register on KakaoTalk, or you want to register on Google, you write your first name, second name, and your ID and other things, right? So these inputs from the user are stored on variables, and then they will be saved on a database. So variables allow you to store data on your program. And there are many different types of variables, because there are different types of data. There is a string type of data, there is a numbered type of data, there is a decimal type of data. So for each type, we have a different type of data or different type of variable. And how do you then write a variable? So to write a variable, first you have to define a variable by telling the compiler what is the name of the variable, and you assign initial value to that variable. And to assign initial value or any other value to a variable, you use the assignment statement or the assignment operator. So the assignment statement helps you to place a value into a variable, and later on you can use these variables, or you can use these values in order to do other things. There are two types of or three types of variables. Let's go back to other programming language to discuss these types of variables. So the first type of variable is statically typed variable. A statically typed variable means the variable type is known beforehand. And this is good because it allows us to find errors during compiling. And C++ and Java are kind of programming languages that used statically typed variables. Whereas in Python, we use dynamically typed variables. And this means that the type of the variable is known when the program is executed. So in this case, you can see that we declare a variable, or in statically typed variable, we declare a variable. Oh, okay. So this is the name of the variable, and this is the type of the variable. So integer, that means in this variable we are going to store an integer, which is 7. But in dynamically typed programming language, we store the value into a variable, and in that case the compiler will know that, oh, okay, this variable stores. So this variable now stores 7. That means num is now an integer. However, in Dart, we have a hybrid type. That means we can declare a variable using its type and then a variable name, or we can just declare a variable without using its type, and the compiler will realize what type of variable it is during execution. These are some of the variables or the variable types that we use in Dart, and you can see that we have integer variable type, which helps us store non-decimal non-decimal data, and double allows us to store decimal numbers. Bool allows us, or boolean allows us to store true and false, and string allows us to store a sequence of characters, and we also have other type of variables, and we have, maybe today we'll see list, map, and set, which allows us to provide, or which provides us with a collection of classes, or collection of variables. And in Dart, this is how you declare a variable, or how you define a variable. So if you want to store, if your program interacts with age, say your program registers students in the class, then you want to know the name, the age, the height of the class. So you declare a variable which is called age, or which is named age, and age is normally an integer, so your variable type will be an integer. So when you do this kind of declaration, the type is an integer and the name of the variable is an age. So whenever after you declare a variable, you can assign a value to your variable. That means when you declare a variable, say such as rate, and which is a type of double, that means rate can hold any decimal point. That means rate can be 20, rate can be 30.0, rate can be 1.5, rate can be 2.5. So this variable will hold any real number or any decimal number. But mind you, here the equal sign is not about a comparison. We are not saying rate equals to 5. We say 5 is assigned to rate. And what we do is actually this assignment operator copies the value on the right side to the variable on the left side. And the comparison operator will be discussed in the next chapter. And variables always must appear on the left side. So if you do this, there will be an error. If you remember, we discussed that error is a condition that prevents your program from running. So this kind of mistakes will prevent your program from running. And you can declare a variable, or you can define a variable without any value or with some value. So initializing means to assign a value during definition. So you can see that the value is defined, the variable is defined, and at the same time it is assigned some value. However, in this case, double pay and int hour, they are not initialized. So initializing means giving a value to a variable during definition or during declaration. So let's see the importance of a variable, or the use of a variable in Dart programming. So you can see that now you can create a program not only greets generally, but greets by a name. So in this case, you declare a variable name, and this variable holds a string or a name to anyone who is using this program. So if John is using this program, then it will hold John's name. If Patrick is using this name, then this variable will hold Patrick's name. So instead of just greeting, you can just hold the name and greet by name. So instead of saying hello, you can say hello Yellow, or you can say hello John, depending on the person's response. And to do this, we'll go back to our JDoodle and try to type in this program. But to save time, I will use an already typed, but you can go to JDoodle and type this program in and see what it does. However, there are some issues with JDoodle that you must handle in order to run this program. So if you come to this JDoodle, so you can see that the program remains the same. I have this program. However, the goal was you write this program, and when you execute it, it will say enter your name. And then you'll type your name and it will say hello Dre. However, because JDoodle is an online tool and it will not allow us, whenever you have to enter a data or whenever you have to input a data, you have to input it using this box. So for instance, if I execute this program, it will expect some name here. So if you want to change the name, then you can say yellow here, then execute it. You can say, you can see now that it is saying hello yellow. What it is doing is actually it run the program. It will execute the first instruction. The first instruction does not require any user interaction, and then it will print enter your name. When it prints or when it displays enter your name, because this is an online tool, you cannot type in your name. So whatever you enter on top of this box or on top of this text area will be taken by the online compiler and it will be assigned to name. So it reads from here. But this was not supposed to act this way, but we have to do it like this. Therefore, later on, whenever we have to interact with variable or whenever we have to input a variable, then we'll input a variable using this text area. And when there are multiple variables, we use an enter or a return to enter those multiple variables. So as you can see, I write my instruction, and here, because we are using this std in, we have to import this Dart.io, and we'll see this Dart, what Dart.io is, or how it helps us write our program. As an exercise, for this, you can edit the code to get the first and last name and print greetings using first and last name. So if I were you, what I will do is I'll just copy paste this. So what you should do is actually now write two names. So yellow Dalalam and if you execute this program, unless we made some problem, yeah, it will say hello yellow zalala. So you should have edited this program this way, but I helped you do this, but later on you have to write your own programs, or you have to do your own assignments. Yeah, so as you can see, variables can allow you interact with your user, and they will hold the input from the user. But here what you should know is that input cannot only come from the keyboard. Input can be read or can be read from file. So you can read input from file, you can read input from the internet, or you can read input from the keyboard, you can read input from mic and speakers. So once you read input, you process that input, or you compute using that input, and to receive that data you need variables which are named storage for your programs. Therefore, now the question is, okay, why can't we use a variable or one variable for every data? If you remember our discussion in the first video, we say that when we program, we have to efficiently use our memory storage, because our memory storage has a limited resource, right? So if we use the same variable type, the first thing is we cannot catch errors very easily. For instance, in this case, let's write a program which is int num is 7, and string name is John, and double pi is 3.14, right? But if you try to add these numbers, or if you try to add this variable, then this is an error, because this is an integer and this is a string. You cannot combine an integer and a string. Later you can use some processing in order to combine an integer and a string. That means first you have to convert this into a string, or you have to convert this one John into an integer, and then you can combine them. But as they are, this is an integer and this is a string. You cannot add them. This is an error. And if you try to do this, the compiler will give you some error. So by using different type, it will make it easier for detecting an error. The second thing is, each variable actually uses different type of each variable uses different memory space. That means integer, if you remember how the memory organizes data, so integer only take probably 4 bytes, and then string take 8 bytes, and then double take 6 bytes. And let's say this is your memory or your RAM. That means your whole memory now, because you know they have a different size, or they occupy different size, then you can rearrange. So you can give the first 4 bytes to num, and the 6 bytes to pi, and then next 6 bytes or the next 8 bytes to name. However, if everything has the same type, then 2 variables will just take the space. So the third variable has no place to be stored. What does this mean? That means that until this memory is freed, until one of these two memories is freed, then the instruction waiting this variable has to wait, and which will make our program slower. So by using different data types, we can be able to use memory efficiently. So that is the reason why we have different variable types. It's easier to detect errors, and it is more efficient to use the memory. When we use or when we talk about variables, we have to talk about constant variables. The constant variables are variables whose value will never change. For instance, the value of pi will never change, right? So when you define constants, you can use the keywords final and const and declare the variable. So for instance, how many hours are in a day? 24, right? It never changes. So when you hold the or when you declare a variable that holds the number of hours in a day, it should be a constant variable. Knowing that this is a constant variable also makes your computer or your CPU to run your program more efficiently. And because we said that Dart is actually a hybrid type, even if Pi does not have any type, the compiler knows it's a double, because we already said that Dart actually allows a hybrid variable declaration and a hybrid variable usage. Now that you know about variables and constant variables, let's use variables and make a program. So you can see that you can just type this code, and the goal of this program is to calculate or to multiply how many hours you worked, and then your rate is known. Finally, it will give you the pay or the final pay. So in this program, we say that, okay, the pay is double because money is decimal, and then the hours that you work is integer because you're going to work either 4 or 5 hours. And then we have a constant. That means your hourly pay rate never changes. So your program now will ask how many hours you worked, and then it will take how many hours you worked, and then finally calculate the pay and display the pay. So your program was supposed to run like this actually. It should have said how many hours did you work, then you enter 5, and then it will say you have earned $25. But as I have told you, and maybe I will not repeat it after this because I don't want to sound like broken radio, you can see that you can use JDoodle. That means you have to insert what you say in the std input area. So this is your program, and you can execute this program. It will say how many hours did you work, but the compiler that is used by this website will read the data from here and calculate the earned money. So if you enter 6, it will say 30 hours, and if you enter $30, and if you enter maybe 67, it will say it will multiply 67 by 5, and you see that you earned 335 US dollars. For this exercise, what you should do is you should edit this program and change the rate to a normal variable. That means you can change the rate into an integer or a double, and then ask user not only to enter how many hours worked, but also what is the rate of his hourly pay. And then you can calculate the total pay. So this is what it will look like when you modify your program. It will say how many hours did you work for. You say 5, and then how much is the rate per hour, 6, and then the total calculation will be, or the total pay will be 30. Basically, you can use every information given in this code to do this exercise, as I have already shown you in the previous exercise. Now that you know that your program uses a variable as a storage for later use, and variables can be of different types because we have different values in different data. Let's discuss each of these data and what let's discuss each of these variable and how we can be able to use them. The first variable which we already used is numbers, and numbers hold numeric values, and mostly in this case we use two types of variables to hold numbers. The first type is integer and the second type is double. As we have already said that numbers can store integers with the keyword int, and doubles store decimal points, and they are declared using double. As you can see that the age of a person is declared using integer, and the height of a person is declared using double. There are some properties and methods associated with number. That means, let's say if you want to know if the number is even or odd. So in this case, what you can do is, if you divide the number by 2 and the remainder is 0, then that number is even. But if you divide by that number by 2 and there is a remainder that is not 0, then that number is odd. You can do all this calculation using Dart programming language. But since these are some of the most common tasks, or since these are the most commonly used instructions, Dart provides us with its own properties. So whenever you have number, you can use just the is even and is odd. Or whether to check the number is finite or not finite, whether the number is negative or not. And there are also methods that are associated with numbers. For instance, if you say or if you use remainder, it will tell you whether the number, it will calculate the remainder and give you the number. Or you can convert a number into a double, or you can convert from the double to an integer. And these are the methods that are associated with numbers, or with variable types int and double. So for instance, if I go to my Dart in my first Dart, and if I try to print 6 dot remainder 5, so 6 divided by 5 has a remainder of 1, right? So what you'll see here is it will say hello from Dart, and you'll see the remainder 1 here. So you can use all other methods that are related to integers and doubles as follows later when you start programming large programs. But for the time being, knowing that these methods and these properties exist is enough. But here is one thing you should know. The methods we discuss here and the properties we discuss here are the most common ones. That means there are plenty of methods and properties that are associated with each variable type, and you have to first search whether that method or that property exists before you define or before you write your own method. And there are too many methods and properties, so you don't have to know everything, but know that there exists plenty of them. The second variable type that we discuss, or the most common variable type we discuss, is string. String is actually a series or a sequence of characters in a single or double quotation. Letters, numbers, and special characters can be included in this double or single quote, and they can become a string. They are just like a word or a text. And if you want to combine two strings, or if you want to merge two strings, you can use just the addition sign. String interpolation is combining variables and expressions with a string. So for instance, you have an integer variable which is age, and you want to display the person's age. So in that case, what you can do is you can put a $sign and the variable name inside a string. So this will display, or when you print this, it will say you are 21 years old. So there are some properties associated with a string, and there are also some methods. For instance, you can change all strings to lowercase and all the letters in the string to uppercase, and you can trim. That means you can remove some characters from the string. You can compare two strings, and you can convert an integer and a double or other variables into strings using these methods. The other variable type we should be discussing is a Boolean type, and the Boolean type allows us to store true or false, or Boolean values. And this is actually used, or usually used, with decisions and conditional statements. We'll see what decisions and conditional statements are. And you declare a Boolean variable using the keyword bool. So you can see that this bool is flag. So if you assign this, or the result of this comparison to this variable, then it will either print true or false. So 10 is greater than 5. So this is true, right? So the processing of this data will return true, and you put, or you store this in flag, and if you print flag, it will actually print true. In the same case, 10 is less than 5. This is false. If you print this flag, it will print false. The next type of variable that we'll discuss is list. List contains an ordered collection of group of objects. This is similar to array in C++, Java, or Java. It holds multiple values in a single array. You can declare using the keyword var or using the keyword list. And when you declare using the keyword list, you have to announce the variable type. So you can see that Dart uses hybrid variable declaration and variable usage. So for instance, instead of declaring, or instead of using string variables such as fruit1 orange, fruit2 banana, fruit3 mango, you can create a list that contains all fruit types, or you can create a list that contains all days of the week, or every month in a year, because these are collection of objects of similar condition or similar situation. And to access element of a list, you use the index. So if you want to access banana, you say list fruit and in bracket 0, which we'll see a little bit later on or in this slide. A list can be fixed or it can be growable. That means the list can be dynamic or static. If you want to create a fixed list, then you have to say how many elements will be in that list. For instance, number of days in a week is 7, right? So you know that for creating, or when you create a list that contain days in a week, then the list can be fixed with number 7. And with a list such as like fruits, when you are not certain how many numbers of elements that list holds, then you can make your list growable. So to access the value, you have to use these brackets. So if you want to access banana, then you have to say fruits list 0. So you have to use the index. And to know the length of a list, you may be asking, why do I have to know the length of a list, right? But later on, when you talk about in this course, when you talk about iterations and looping, you'll understand why you have to know the length of a list or a set, as we'll discuss later on. So in this case, fruits has 3 elements. So whenever you want to know, you can display it. Maybe you are asking, why do I have to declare a fixed or a growable? So since growable is dynamic, I can just declare using dynamic. But it all boils down to memory usage, because the more you declare a growable list, the more memory will be used. And when you declare a fixed list, now the memory knows how many bytes or size of the memory exactly to be used. So it will not create confusion, which will actually improve efficiency. So unless otherwise you have to, it is nice to declare, or it is good to declare a fixed list. There are also properties and methods that are associated with a list. If you want to add more data, then you can use the add method. And usually the add method actually appends the element from the back or from the last. So if you add banana to the previous list, then if you add avocado to the previous list, you can see that avocado is added at the end of the list. If you want to add multiple elements, then you can create multiple elements and use add all. If you want to insert in between 2 elements, then for instance you have a list which is called num list, and in this list you want to insert probably 12, right? You want to insert 12 here, and in that case you can use the insert element and you can say numList.insert to 12. So at the position 2, insert 12. So there is 0, 1, 2. When we are talking about lists, we do not count from, or we do not start counting from 0. When we count list or element of a list, we start from 0, not from 1. So that's why it is 0, 1, 2. So the same thing is actually discussed here. So a representation of a list starts from 0 instead of 1. If you want to insert more elements, so you can see that insert at the 0 index, 8 and 9. So in this case, 8 and 9 will be added to this list. So you can see that you can create a list of integers, or as we already discussed, you can create a list of strings, a list of doubles. There are more methods that you can use actually to modify and edit your list. If you want to change the value of a single list, you just use actually using the index. So if you want to add 110 at the third index, so you can see that num list at the third index will be 1110, and the rest of the data will be pushed back. You can replace range of elements. For instance, you can replace range from 0 to 3. That means if you replace it 0, 1, 2, so it will replace from 0, 1, 2, so it will replace 80, 100, and 100 here. You can remove at some you can remove an element from the list by giving the value of the element, or you can remove the element at a given index, or you can remove the last element, or you can remove a range of elements. So you can see the change in the list while using all of these methods. To practice what we have discussed about a list, you are given this template, and using this template you can be able to create your own list and practice. So you can see this is the instruction. So create a list that contains 5 months, and the months are given here, and then you have to add July to the list. So to do this, you can easily go to Chrome, JDoodle, and probably to create a list you can say list, and then string Windows. Then you can add to your list using Mondes.add July, and then you can print. If you run this program, you can see that the first list is updated by July. So we have here, and if you print Mondes here, actually you can see the difference. So here is the first list, and here is after it is updated. Other type of variable that we can use is set. And the difference between list and set is that in set we can only store unique values. We cannot store duplicated values in a set. So to see this example, for instance, take a look at this example, or colors of a country. So colors of a British flag holds blue, red, white. Colors of Canadian flag, red and white. Colors of an Italy flag, it is containing green, white, red. You can declare a set using var or using set keyword. And the difference between a set and a list, to easily identify them, is list uses square brackets where sets use braces. There are some properties associated with the set, and there are also methods associated with the set. So if you want to add an element to a set, or you want to add multiple elements to a set, you can use just des.add or des.addAll. You can find elements at add, and you can check whether an element is contained and other things. There are operations that are associated with a set similar to the mathematical set. So you can combine two sets using union, and you can find the intersection using intersection, and you can find the difference between two sets. So for instance, the union between an Italian and a British flag contains all these colors. The intersection of a British and Italian flag contains only red and white, and the difference between a British and an Italian flag is blue, and you can see that here. So to do that, you can use these methods. For instance, let's say we have two numbers or two integer sets. One is prime numbers up to 10, and the second is odd up to 10. So if you want to print the union of those two, you'll see this set. If you want to use intersection, this is the intersection set. If you want to print the difference, then you can see that from these two sets, the difference is 2. So because the second set contains 3, 5, and 7. So when you have two sets, you can use all these properties. To practice set, there is also a template given. You can use, or you can read each instruction and complete this exercise. That's it for today's class. I hope to see you that's it for today's class. I'll see you in the next video lecture, or I'll talk to you in the next video lecture.